All right. Well, good morning. I thought that we played with some energy in the Maryland game. Came out and was pleased with the effort, especially early on, and the intensity that we played. Certainly, we're going to have to carry that over this week. Playing a team that's really hot, won 5 of their last 6, undefeated at home, and they're really playing well right now. So they've had a week off to rest up and get healed up. I think they've got some really good individual players, and right now they're playing well. So we've got to continue to try to build on last week and gain some momentum and show up and play our game and see what happens. It's a big game, conference game, and a chance for us to go 3-1 this second half of the season and to get even overall. So it's a huge game for both teams.
North Carolina's defense leads the league in tackles for loss. Is that something you have to stay away from, especially on first down?
Well, I think that the reason you usually have a lot of tackles for loss is they stun a lot, slant, but they also get guys in long yardage situations. So what you got to do is try to stay out of long yardage stuff.
Paul, it's impossible for fans not to look at the future and put their checklist together on what needs to happen for Tech to get back in the Coastal race. Do you do that? Do you say anything to players about not wasting energy doing that, or is it something you even talk about openly?
Well, I think that this time of the year in November, I mean, we've got 2 conference games left. Yeah, it's time to talk about it. And, what we can do is only what we can do. We got to go to North Carolina and win. If we go up there and win, then we'll see how it unfolds. But certainly we're not mathematically out of it by any stretch. So, but if we don't win, it won't matter. So, you try to control what you can control, and the big thing is going up there. Carolina has 2 losses. To me, even though they're not eligible for the championship, it's got to go through them. So for us to have any chance, we've got to win this game, and then we'll see what happens. Who knows? You might be in position if you can win this game.
Along the same lines, the school's got 15 straight bowl appearances, 2 more wins, you qualify. Is that a topic of discussion as well with the team? Or?
It's been a topic, yeah. It's one of the goals for the season, yeah, to go to a bowl game and win a bowl game. That's one of the goals the team set. So it's an important game in that matter as well.
Kind of going back to just the race, it's been kind of an odd season in the league just in terms of upsets and so forth. I'm curious what you've seen and what your thoughts are.
Overall in the league, I hadn't really thought a whole lot about it. I've had enough to try to piece together here. I think it's fairly balanced. We haven't played Florida State. Clearly they're the top-ranked team in the league and I think leading the country in defense, so they're probably pretty good. I think, the Coastal Division has kind of been – all the games have been close. You look even at Miami, I mean, they win here in overtime. They've been really close games. North Carolina's won some – they beat Miami 18-14. Duke won a close game against North Carolina. I mean, all the games have been fairly close. I think the teams are somewhat evenly matched. Some of the things you can't explain. I mean, you look at Virginia. NC State beats Florida State in Raleigh, and then Virginia goes in there and hadn't won a game and thumps them. Actually, you could make a case for Maryland before last week. Maryland could have won all their ACC games. I mean, they miss a 30-yard field goal against NC State and really have a chance. Boston College scores almost on the last play against them. So they could have it's just been that kind of year.
You mentioned yesterday about trying to keep Bernard under control. What do you do to do that?
Well, you got to tackle for one thing. I mean, he's the kind of guy, if you miss tackles, he's going to go the distance. He's got great speed. You got to try to hem him in and rally around him. I mean, the first guy's not going to get him down every time, so you got to have more guys coming. And clearly he's the key to their success, I think. I mean, he's a good player. They have the tight ends, played well, and they've got some good receivers, but I think he's the key.
Paul, the tempo they play at it on offense, how do you replicate that? Can you replicate that in practice to get ready for something like that?
Yeah, I think you can. I think that what you do is you run two groups, and as soon as one's finished, the next one's up there running again. So it'd be impossible to go any faster than that. So it's you replicate it the best you can. Now, are you going to get the quality of it as well? That's the issue. And the hard part is having enough linemen to do that, but we can certainly rep two groups of skill guys, and they're not real big on changing personnel. They just try to get a lot of snaps, and what you hope the nature of the way we play will frustrate them a little bit too. I mean, we was talking earlier. You break down the North Carolina State game. Both teams had the ball 20 times. By contrast, you go to our Maryland game, they had it 9 times. The week before, we had it 8 times. It's going to fall somewhere in the middle. I would doubt there's going to be 20 possessions. So if we could get off to a good start and get that thing slowed down, maybe they don't want to go as fast.
Paul, looking at the difference between those two approaches, speeding up the pace and slowing down the pace, what are the advantages of each? Obviously, when you speed up the pace, you hope to wear down a defense and so forth and catch some personnel switches and so forth. But what are the advantages and disadvantages of both approaches?
Well, I think that really, if you're looking for numbers and you want to score a lot of points, the more plays you run, clearly the more points and the more numbers you should have. On the flip side, the more opportunities your defense is going to have. So if you got 20 possessions, the other team's going to have 19 or 20. That's just the way it is. So it's just a philosophy on how you want to do it. I think that offensively, if you can stay on the field and run a lot of plays, certainly you can tire the other defense out, and you can hopefully score more points. On the flip side, you should be better defensively if you're not doing that. You should.
Given the quality of this offense that North Carolina has, would it be fair to say that just you'll learn a lot more about how much your defense has improved?
I think you learn every game. I mean, I don't know. Clearly, they've got some outstanding personnel, but I think you learn every game. Each game's different.
Paul, clearly your front seven defensively last week, your offensive line last week were dominant on both sides of the ball, controlled the line of scrimmage. Obviously, in every game that's big, but how much confidence does that give the group moving forward against North Carolina?
Well, hopefully you build on it. I mean, defensively, we had some issues with our eyes and doing some of the things, especially in the second half. But for the most part, we probably played as well in the first half defensively as we played in a while. You also take into consideration who they were playing with, too. But I was really proud of the offensive line. I thought that they came off the ball, and, Maryland was playing with a down-the-line quarterback, but that didn't have anything to do with their defense. And I thought our guys, started with some intensity and played well. And defensively, they have some good players. I mean, they weren't fourth in the country in top 10, but they'd played West Virginia. They'd played some high-scoring teams. And so we did some good things that way. And I think defensively, it's clear there's a lot of things we can build on.
Was it more of an effort thing or an execution thing in terms of, even
I think just
wide
the
receivers
energy,
and
intensity, and the whole 9 yards. I mean, we keep a stat on defenders to the ground, and we had more than we've had all year. I mean, not even close. It was guys getting after it, playing with some urgency. And that's the way you got to play if you're going to have a chance to be any good. You can't go through the motions.
read earlier against yesterday that you plan to announce your quarterback situation. Hold it the way you did it last week. Same approach. Does that help your team having? I mean, you ask your quarterback to do the same thing in your offense, but for the opposition, they still have to prepare for two guys. Is that?
You'd have to ask them. I would think they prepare the same way. I mean, we didn't run any different plays or anything different with either quarterback last week. And the way we practice, we run 2 huddles in offense. We really believe in maximizing reps, and we get a lot of reps. And the second group's running if we're not on a script, they're running the same play as the first group, but it's just back to back. And we interchange those guys all the time. Like, for instance, we have an option period every day where we run just live option plays for 15 minutes against all fronts and all stuff. And you might put Tev in the first huddle for 7.5, and the other guy, and I mean, they rotate and play with both groups. And so I really don't think that's an issue for us. I'd be surprised. It's not like we're running 2 different offenses where, when one guy gets in, all of a sudden you change gears and it's a passing offense. And that would be awfully hard even for us to do. I mean, because forget the quarterback, the other 10 guys would have to learn 2 different things, I
guess along those lines, does it seem like Vad is getting a lot more comfortable running what you're asking him to do in the base offense as opposed to just kind of running around?
I think he is. I think he's getting better every week. And I think that it's been good the way it's happened for him. He hadn't been thrown out there. And, I think as a quarterback, it's also good to be able to stand over there and watch the other team play for a series or 2 and get a feel for it, know where they are, know what the checks are, and know what's happening, as opposed to just kind of getting thrown out there and not knowing it. I think both quarterbacks bring something to the game. Tevin has a lot of experience. He's played a lot of football. You're not going to line up too many ways that he's not seen or doesn't know what to do. Vad brings a lot of athleticism and a lot of energy when he comes out there. And so you kind of get 2 different things out of both those guys. And as he progresses, as I've said all along, the more he gets accustomed to doing what we're doing, the better he gets at it, the more he's going to play, because clearly he does bring some athleticism to the position.
Well, you talked about Gio as a receiver and a runner, and obviously got tackling game on the ground, tackle with leverage. How much do you change any kind of plan when he decides to go back there and return punts? I know he's not their featured guy, but when they want to take one back, he's taking 2 back this year for touchdowns.
Yeah.
Is there a different plan for him back there?
Well, I think what you have to do is you just have to make sure that you're sound and covering the things. I think we're going to have Sean Poole back this week as a punter, which should help some. Hopefully you don't punt as much. But clearly he's dangerous, and the nature of what we've done from a punt team-wise is we're getting a lot of guys down the field. The return game we've been okay at, and we've turned some guys loose rushing at times and hadn't kicked the ball consistently. But, you can attempt to punt away from the guy, or you can do some different things. We may rugby punt some. You may do some of that. But all in all, you just got to play and be sound and go cover the guy,
Paul, getting back to the 2 quarterback situation, how much do you tailor your play calls to the skill sets of each guy, or do you just do what you do regardless of who's at quarterback?
No, you try to call to what you feel like gives you the best chance to be successful. It's not just the quarterback. It's who's the running back, who's the receivers, who's the offensive lineman. It's like I said before, it doesn't do any good to run pulling plays if guys can't pull. It doesn't do any good to run option routes with a wide receiver if he's not very good at running an option route. You try to play to the strengths of the guys that are in the game, and certainly you do the same at quarterback. I mean, if a guy's not as good at one aspect and he's better than another, you try to give him what he does better and what he's more comfortable with, within reason. But you can't change the whole. There's 11 parts. It's not just one part, and you can't make the other 10 do something they're not good at because one guy's good at something else. So you have to kind of mesh it all together. And it's not changed. You know, we're to the point now with Vad where he's going to run the same stuff that everybody else runs. Early in the year, that was not the case. We just couldn't do it. Thus, when he went in the game, it was a different set of plays. It was stuff that I felt like that he could do better and handle, and that played to his strengths.
Tevin is one touchdown short of tying Josh for the ACC and school record for rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. I'm curious as what your thoughts about that and what's enabled him to be an effective player down by the goal line.
Well, I don't really have any thoughts about it per se. I think that Tevin's a very tough guy, and the nature of what we do, because we don't have two backs back there, when we get down on the goal line, that guy carries the ball a lot. And he's been a tough physical runner down there, and he manages to get it in. A lot of the plays are quarterback ISOs and follow plays, and he's got a knack for getting it in. Plus, he's broken some longer plays and scored. The nature of what we do, I think, lends itself to that. Thus, Josh is one, and he's two, getting ready to be one. So the two quarterbacks that have played in this system are going to be 1-2 at that.
Paul, as you're looking defensively, base set, is it become a nickel set this week because of the way they play? Ebron being a guy that's not necessarily a great edge blocker, but an outstanding receiver. How does that change what you do defensively?
Well, I don't know that we'll change into a straight nickel set. I mean, it may dictate some of the things we do, but the bottom line is we still got to stop the run. I mean, I think that's the first thing whenever you play every week. You have to try to do your best to stop that, and if you can do that, then it makes it a little bit easier to do some of the other stuff. What it may enable us to do is play some different people at that outside linebacker position in certain situations for coverage or whatever. Yeah, but we don't have any plans to wholesale change what we're doing. We're still trying to learn what we're doing actually.
Watt's physical abilities, I mean, he was sort of a borderline safety type guy coming out of high school. Does that give you that flexibility to not have to go into that nickel look because he can
Well,
flex
when we
and cover?
started the season, when we were playing all those packages early in the year, he was the nickel back. So, he can do most of the things in space that those guys can do. Now, when you get past him, then there's some things where maybe another guy might be better in space than somebody else, and it might be the way we do it. We may take an inside linebacker out in nickel, or take a down lineman out and add another defensive back somewhere or whatever. But we haven't done a whole lot of that this year. Not since the change. We did a whole lot of it early.
I guess thinking more about Tevin, I'm curious. I know that he runs a lot of those ISOs and the follows. What makes that a more effective play than putting giving it to the B back for a dive?
You got a lead blocker in front of him. The B back becomes the lead blocker, and the team has to play the option. They don't know if it's a follow play or they have to have somebody outside for the quarterback in the pitch. And normally teams have one guy assigned for the B back, one for the quarterback, one for the pitch, and they try to gain a half a guy. Well, it's just kind of a duck play. I mean, it's like a quarterback ISO, but to use the B back as the lead blocker as opposed to being in the eye and using the fullback as the blocker and hand it to the tailback.
One thing I noticed, often down there you'll have two tackles on one side and a wide receiver on the tackle spot on the other. What's kind of the logic behind, or why do you run it that way?
We don't have a tight end, so when we want to run the tight end stuff and protect the quarterback on the option, again, if you have no tight end and the outside linebacker has the quarterback on the option, he's unblocked. Well, you don't mind if you're pitching off him all the time, but if you want to pitch off the next guy out or you want to do something else, you want a guy over there that can block the guy, so you cover up the quarterback. So they can't come get the guy right now.
Could you also put a tackle there instead of a wide receiver?
On the backside?
Right.
You could, but he wouldn't be eligible. And then the safety would go over to the other side by leaving the wide receiver over there. somebody has to cover the guy down. If they don't cover him, you can throw the ball back to him.
You've done that going years back.
Yeah, we've done it when they don't cover him down.
Yeah.
That's why they cover him down.
I was counting up, excluding Carolina, I think as many as 8 teams could be bowl eligible in the conference. Just your thoughts, not as it relates specifically to your team, but just the conference overall strength of the conference and kind of where you see, the perception of the ACC nationwide.
I'd be hard-pressed to comment on that. Like I said, I've been so focused on my own team. I mean, clearly the bottom line is I think conferences are evaluated on how your top teams play and where they are. And Florida State has the one loss. Clemson has the one loss. They're clearly the marquee teams of the conference this year. And I think for the perception to get better, you're going to have stronger teams in the front. I mean, you're going to have somebody up there in the top 5 or 6, and till that happens, the perception's not going to be as good. I think our conference is probably more balanced than most. You could make a case. You take those 2 teams out, everybody's kind of beating everybody. And, like I said, we didn't play Florida State, and I think Clemson's really good, but if you were at the game, I mean, we were in the game. I mean, we had a chance in the fourth quarter. We're ahead in the game. So I think that there's some balance where a lot of the other conferences, the top 2 teams are probably clearly nobody's really gives them much of a tussle other than themselves.
Paul, 2-part question. Knowing you've said in the past, depending on what time you get home after a game, on certain Saturdays you'll watch some college football.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen Oregon much this year? And do you sometimes admire what you see other teams do, even if it's not something you do? And do you ever pick off concepts by what you see on TV with the idea of one day incorporating them in what you do?
I think I've seen Oregon play a little bit. Yeah, you're always looking at other teams to try to take things. I mean, that's the nature of the game, whether it's a pass route or whether it's a way to play or whatever. I think that you always have respect for teams that are doing things well. Clearly, Oregon has had a heck of a run here the last 3 or 4 years, and the system has been good. New Hampshire was doing that before Oregon was doing it in 1AA. I mean, in fact, Chip was there. So there have been people doing there's a lot of teams besides Oregon that are trying to do what Oregon's doing that aren't quite as successful as Oregon. So it's, I think anytime teams are successful, and there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. I mean, there's a lot of ways to be successful. If you look at the top teams, you would say Oregon and probably even I'd put Kansas State somewhere in the mix. Oregon's Oregon, then you got Kansas State, then you got Notre Dame, Alabama, who are very similar, who rely on defense and a running game and a more power game. Well, they're all pretty good, and they're all successful, and they're all at the top. So there's a lot of ways to do things. I think if you just got to get the right personnel for what you do. Clearly Alabama's not going to play like Oregon. Coach Saban would have a hissy if he won 63-55. I mean, he's not going to play that way where both teams get 20 possessions and it becomes that way. Where if you play that way, you don't sweat it. That's just the way you play. And, it's like again, I'll come back because I just broke it down this weekend. I'll come back to the last game with North Carolina State. Both teams had over 500 yards in the game, right? Do you know how many times both teams punted in the game? 9. Both teams punted the ball 9 times. Now, we struggled against BYU immensely on offense, but you'd have to go at least 2-3 games for us to have punted 9 times. It's just a different way of playing. It doesn't make one right or one wrong. It's just kind of the way they play. And Oregon can be the same thing. I mean, Oregon is very efficient offensively, so I doubt they've punted 9 times in a game. But they could. I bet you if you go back and you look at the Oregon-Southern Cal game, I did not watch it, so I'm just guessing off the top of my head. I might be dead wrong. I bet you that there was a lot of possessions in that game. I doubt they scored every time they had the ball, either team. Now, they might have, but I doubt it. You know, but it was just a longer game. It's just the way they play. It's, you know, some people enjoy watching that. Some people enjoy watching Alabama and LSU, you know, who plays differently. It's just a different style.
So which do you enjoy, I guess?
I just, you know, if I have a chance to watch, I just enjoy watching them when I don't care who wins. It's just fun to watch players and to watch things and to see individual players play well and to see good ideas and good schemes. I mean, that's kind of what you do and what you enjoy watching.
To that effect, then, do we miss the boat by not looking at things like percentages or ratios compared to numbers and yards and all that?
To me, if you're going to really evaluate how good somebody is what's the percentage of scores per possession? Or what's the, you know, because if a team, say for instance, and that could vary just because of what you do. And again, it depends. Alabama can probably get several possessions because defensively they're really good. It doesn't matter that they're not hurrying up. If the other team's 3 and out a lot, they'll get a lot more kicks at the can. So, but if you look and you go average, you know, how many times did you score? Let's say that they had the ball 12 times in a game. Well, did they score 7 of the 12? It's pretty good. Or whatever, you know. Just like if Oregon had the ball 20 times and they scored 10 of the 20, that's still pretty good. You know, that's half the time. As opposed to somebody who had the 20 possessions and scored 24 points or 28 points, you know, because they only scored 4 of the 20 possessions. It's not so good. And if you're coaching defense, I'm sure you look at it the other way in that everybody says, man, you're terrible on defense. You're not any good. But at the same time, I mean, I remember going back all the way to Hawaii in the wide open back when it was the WAC and watching Utah and San Diego State. And, I mean, this fast pace is not new. I mean, they used to get 20 possessions in a game. They'd throw it every down. Well, the score would end up being 38-35, and everybody would go, man, they can't play a lick of defense. When in reality, they were playing pretty good defense. They just had a lot of turns, you know. So it's all relative.
How has Robbie played this year? It seems like he's been pretty effective.
Robbie Godhigh?
Yeah.
I think he's been consistent. Robbie's been he's done a good job at what we've asked him to do. He's been a solid blocker. When he's had the ball in his hands, he's run well with it. I think he's had a good year.
I imagine I don't know if he calls surprise, but he's fulfilled expectations, I imagine.
I don't think I've been surprised with Robbie. I think we knew he was a tough guy and had some ability. I think even when he walked on coming out of high school, he had a really good high school career in Cobb County, and we knew he wasn't a zero. I mean, we knew he was a pretty good player.